Philippians chapter 2 from verse 1 to 4. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Miracle. Morning, everybody. My name's Josh. I suppose I've already been up the front. Could have introduced myself then. But do keep that passage open in front of you. We're going to be looking at that passage. We're going to be looking a little bit further on in Philippians as well. So do keep the passage there or your phone on. As I speak, we really do want this to be a time where everyone can follow along. We recognize there's different languages in our church, in our congregation. So we want to do our best to make sure everyone can listen in and understand what's being said. So we do have a program where you can get a live text translation into a language of your choice. And so that's these QR codes at the sides here. We often point them out, but we really do want you to make use of them. Feel free to get out of your seat to go and scan it quickly if you'd like to. There's one by the communion table there. Or if you can kind of point your phone at it, then you'll be able to follow along and read what I'm saying in your language. And it has got the capacity for several different languages in the world. So we hope that whoever you are, you will be able to join and follow along this morning. Before we come to look at God's word, let's pray. Dear Father, we pray that today as we look at your word, you will change us and form us and make us more and more into the church that reflects the global love you have for people of all nations and languages. Help us to be transformed more and more into a church who are serious about that and live it out in the way we behave. Amen. Every day I walk through the university campus, and there's a square outside the University of Liverpool campus where they have little pop-up markets from time to time. And about 3 or 4 times a year, they have a houseplant sale. As I walk through the houseplant market, some of them have caught my eye. I think, you know what, houseplants look quite nice. I would quite like to have the kind of house which is adorned by the kind of the leafy greenery, the feel that this is kind of airy and tidy and fresh. I quite like the idea. I mean, it's a lovely picture that behind me. Houseplants in my house. I'd like to have the kind of house that is adorned by houseplants. But I have bought some houseplants, and I've discovered that I do not do well with houseplants. It's not that I don't water them. It's that I do water them. But I didn't know. I thought you had to water plants. I might water them every day. But some plants don't like that. And you have to know your plants to know how much water to give them. And whether to give them water or not water, or keep them in the sun, because they need, I did science in school, photosynthesis. No, apparently not. They don't need to be in the sun. And they don't need water. I don't really know. So I've discovered that if I want my house to be the type of house that is adorned by houseplants, I've got to be the type of person who goes out of my way to learn how to look after them. Well, International Sunday is a great day to celebrate the fact that we want this house to be the type of house, we want this church to be the type of church that's made up of people of all different nationalities and languages and cultures. We think that's important. We think that's what the Bible teaches a church should be. We were looking in the book of Ephesians between September and Easter at the fact that because of what Jesus has done, we all come to God on the same basis, and it breaks down barriers of culture and race. We think our church should be the type of church that expresses that. But here's the thing, just like if I want my house to be the type of house that's got houseplants, I need to learn how to be the type of person who can look after them. Well, so it is. If you want to be the kind of church who genuinely includes and loves and values people from different backgrounds and nationalities and cultures, well, you have to be committed to being the type of person who loves those people. International Sunday is not just something we say we like. International Sunday means we commit ourselves to hospitality. And that's not just something we think is a good idea. It's actually the truth of the gospel means we should be committing ourselves to hospitality. And we see that in the passage that was read to us from Philippians. In short, these few verses say that the gospel means others come first. Let's have a look at that. If you've got a finger in that passage, open it up again, or if you've got it on your phone, bring it up again. The flow of the passage is this. It starts by saying, if you're enjoying the good things that come with being in Jesus, so if you're a Christian and you think that's worth something and that is changing you, well, if that's the case, then secondly, you'd be united among yourselves, and therefore that means you put others above yourself. So look at verse 1. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, any comfort from his love, any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, which all are things that all Christians have, by the way. These are things that we think all Christians should be growing in, remembering that you are united with Christ, remembering that you have comfort in his love and share in the Spirit. Well, if that's true, if you're a Christian, well then verse 2, make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. That's with each other. So it's revealing that church isn't just a group of disconnected people turning up at a place of worship just to do their own thing. If we're united to Jesus, we're united to each other. And International Sunday celebrates that. International Sunday reminds us that, yes, we come together at church on a Sunday to meet Jesus Christ, to love his church and connect with Liverpool. We come to meet Jesus, but if we meet Jesus, then we love his church. So we become united in one mind. But then comes the kicker in these verses. Look at verses 3 and 4. Paul says, look, if that's true, then everyone you see is more important than you. Have a look at verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. There was a video doing the rounds on social media a few years ago. I think it's staged, and I think there's other versions of it. So you might have seen one of these yourself. But it's like a social experiment. Somebody films a man walking around a park, and he goes up to people who are having their lunch, and he asks them for a bite of their lunch, which seems quite a cheeky thing. This man goes up to the people having a picnic and says, oh, can I have a sandwich? And he goes up to someone just tucking into their Subway, and he says, do you mind if I have a bite? And they all say no, because it's cheeky, because it's intrusive. It is cheeky. You don't want someone asking you for a bite of your lunch. But the video is provocative because it ends with the man going up to a homeless man. And the homeless man has just got a bit of bread or just one sandwich that a passerby gave him. And he says to the homeless man, do you mind if I have a bit of that sandwich? And the homeless man says, yeah, of course. Come on, sit down, sit down. And the homeless man breaks the sandwich and shares it with him. Now, as I said, I'm not entirely sure if that's genuine experience of someone or whether it's staged, but it makes you think, doesn't it? That video is there to show us that quite often it is true that when people have got a lot of money, a lot of wealth, a lot of friends, a lot of opportunities, then we think highly of ourselves. And when we think highly of ourselves, we are not going to put the needs of others above our own. But when you're aware that all you have comes from because of the kindness of someone else, well, then you become willing to share with others what you have. That's the pattern of this passage. If I really think about what it means to be united to Christ, that little phrase in verse 1, if I really think about why I need to be comforted by his love, then it reminds me that I'm only here because of the kindness of someone else. That all I have has been given for me. Everything I have is only because Jesus died for me. And that means there's no way that I could possibly be more important than anyone else here. The gospel means others come first. That's how I've been treated. If you were to look on in Philippians verses 5 to 11, describe the way we've been treated, that Jesus said, I'm going to put you first. And when you receive that kindness, well, it means that you think of other people like that too. The gospel teaches us in humility to think of others more highly than we are. To put that in context of our own church, it means that we don't just give a token welcome to people who are different to us. We don't have International Sunday to say, oh, there's some people who are different and let's make them feel welcome. No, we want to say we value people who are different to us. We value them. We would not want to be without you, because it's not that you're different. It's that you're the same as us. If anything, higher than us. We're at the stage of the size of church where quite a lot of people reflect to me that on a Sunday they'll say, well, there's quite a lot of new people, maybe quite a lot of faces I don't know. And on the one hand, that's a really good thing. It's the kind of church we want to be. We would love to be a church which is growing, where we get visitors or newcomers each week. That's a wonderful kind of church to be. But when that's the kind of church we are, we then have a choice. Because if we look to our own interests, if we still think of church as serving our interests, our friendships, our friendship groups, the things we're used to, our habits, our comfort zones of familiar faces, well, if that's how we think of church and we look to our own interests, then actually having new people and people from other cultures actually becomes a really hard and unsettling thing. And that comes out sometimes when people reflect that there's lots of new people. People don't always say it in a way that says, isn't that wonderful? I loved seeing people there today who don't speak English. Sometimes it can come across as a complaint. I don't really find my place in our church anymore. I don't know people. I don't feel as connected. I'm not getting as much out of it as I used to. But that's only going to be a problem if you're looking out for your own interests. Other people become the problem if you're looking out for your interests. But if you are encouraged by being united with Christ, if there's any comfort in his love, any sharing of the same spirit, any tenderness and compassion, if you see yourself as somebody who's only worthy to come through those doors because of the kindness and mercy of Jesus' love, well, then in humility you can value others above yourselves. The gospel changes us to look to the interests of others. To think, well, what can I do while I'm here and they're here? What can I do to put their interests first? To do something that shows them they belong. To do something to meet the needs of people who are not like us. And that's where hospitality comes in. Putting others first means radical hospitality. Now, as we're sharing bits of culture, let me share with you a little bit of British culture. A program from the 1970s that some British people are smiling at already, called Fawlty Towers. It's a comedy program. Now, it's from the 70s, so if you're not British, I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know about it. But it is something that is in our culture. A lot of people know about it. It was before my time, but people pass this on and say, oh, you should watch Fawlty Towers. It's really funny. And again, if you're not British, maybe you wouldn't find it as funny as we do. But it's worth having a little watch. This is the owner of the hotel called Fawlty Towers. And it's basically a comedy about a man who runs a hotel. That's it simply. But the funny thing is, he's really rude to his guests. That is the funny thing. Sometimes he's peeping through their bedroom windows. When his guests are psychiatrists, he's acting all weird and paranoid. He's offending some of his guests because they're German. It felt funny in those days. But it is still funny to watch it happen. You would not want to be a guest at his hotel, but we laugh when he treats his guests rudely. But we think that he is the most inhospitable host. We often think of hospitality as welcoming guests, don't we? Hospitality often means, what can I do for a guest? Invite someone to be a guest in my home, and I treat them well. But I think at a church we should be hospitable, but in a slightly different way. Because we've just seen, if we are all of one spirit, one mind, one hope, one faith, well, we are not one another's guests. We are each other's family. So in a church setting, in a church like ours, hospitality is not so much treating other people well because they're guests, but treating other people well because they belong. Showing by our actions that other people who are not like us belong in our family. So International Sunday is not a gesture that we have once a year to say other people from other countries are welcome as our guests. No, International Sunday is about saying this isn't a novelty, but the norm. International Sunday is not what we do once a year, but actually what we want to be all the time, because people from other countries are not our guests, but our family. International Sunday reminds us to say to people who are different to us, you belong. We want you here. We think more highly of you. And putting into practice the fact that someone else who is different to you belongs is something that we see more of in the book of Philippians. So we had chapter 2 verses 1 to 4 read, but we're going to look at a few bits further on in Philippians. So if you've got chapter 2 open in front of you, we're going to have a little look at verse 25. Philippians is a letter written by a man called Paul to a church in Philippi. And when Paul wrote it, he was in prison. Now, he wasn't from Philippi. He was a guest at Philippi. He turned up there as a complete stranger. But the Philippian church have understood what it means to be united in the faith with Paul. They want to treat him as one of their own. And when they hear that he's gone to prison, they send someone to meet his needs. They send a man called Epaphroditus. So have a little look at Philippians chapter 2, verse 25. This is a stage at which Paul is saying, I'm glad you sent Epaphroditus, but it's time for him to go home. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, who is my brother, my co-worker and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. What has gone on here is a great example of the Philippian church saying to someone outside of them, you belong. We're going to treat you like a member of our family. In those days, the Roman prisons wouldn't have a cafeteria or a canteen. You wouldn't get prison food in the prisons. The way it worked is that you're expected to provide food for yourself. You've got to contact a family member who's going to come and bring you provisions, food and drink to keep you alive. And the Philippians have said, you know what, Paul, he's one of us. He might not be from Philippi. He might not have grown up with us, but we are united with him and he is one of us. Let's treat him like a family member. So they send Epaphroditus. They send him, but it is costly. We learn in verse 26 and especially 27 that Epaphroditus got very ill when he went to serve Paul, and he nearly died. Have a look at verse 30. Because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me. It's been really costly to the Philippians to treat Paul like a family member. And it's been really costly for Epaphroditus. Not only have they sent Epaphroditus, we learn in chapter 4 that they've sent a gift of money with him. Paul says this phrase in chapter 4, verse 14. And again, you might want to go there because we'll return to chapter 4. So turn on a page or flick on in your phones. Chapter 4, verse 14. Paul says, yet it was good of you to share in my troubles. That's what hospitality is. When you say, you belong, you're not our guest, Paul, you're a family member. So when you're in trouble, I want to share that. That's what happens when the gospel teaches us to put the interests of others above our own. We see someone who has troubles and we say, I'm going to take some of what I have and spend it or share it to ease your suffering. I'll take on a little bit less so that you can take on less suffering. Putting others first means radical and often costly hospitality. It means opening up perhaps our personal space that you might think is reserved for ourselves or our family, opening up our homes. Taking what is for us, but actually opening up and saying, you belong, this is for you. It means opening up our personal time, our attentions, our hobbies, the things we like to do, and to say to people at church who are different to us, you belong here as well. You belong in my friendship group. You belong in my social circles. It means taking an attitude of stepping into someone else's need. That means getting to know people in our church who are different from you and thinking, what is a need that I can meet? Maybe you need to free up an afternoon a week to go and meet with that person who needs company. Maybe it's widening your circle of friends. Asking someone for their WhatsApp number so you can invite them to go and play football with you, or go to the cinema with you, or invite them into your gaming circle. Or maybe like Epaphroditus, it means taking a meal to someone. Maybe it's opening up a spare bedroom. But putting others first means radical hospitality, saying you belong. So the things that are mine should be yours. So my home is open, not because I want to make you a guest, but because I want to treat you as family. If there really is any encouragement from being united with Christ and any comfort in his love, then it's worth it to express through our hospitality that other people, even if they're different to us, belong. So I want to encourage you this morning to be deliberate about that and be intentional about it. It doesn't just happen by accident. To plan, to think it through, what can you do? And especially there might be greater needs among people who aren't from our country and our culture. There will be greater needs for people who are not familiar with our culture and our customs, where it's harder to navigate basic things. There's greater needs for people who don't have a good grasp of the English language. But hospitality is saying, you're here and you belong, and putting those words into action. It takes thought and effort, and we do need to be prepared, and especially if there's a language barrier. So I had an idea. I thought, well, maybe what we need is a resource. We need a tool that will help us with that. There are people in our church every week who have to make a huge effort to understand what is being said. I pointed out these QR codes at the start. The way we want to recognize that people have to overcome a language barrier to be in fellowship with us. Well, why don't we get on the front foot? Instead of saying to people, well, please, can you just translate what is going on? Why don't we be prepared for that? In January, someone came, he had a guest speaker, and he got everyone to get their phones out and do something there and then on their phones. And I think that's made a lasting impact. He got us to set an alarm to pray. So I thought maybe what we can do is we can get our phones out and download an app. So here are QR codes. Feel free to get your phones out. It's QR codes to download Google Translate app. Feel free, get your phones out. I'm not going to be judging anyone at this point. Take out the phones. They're big on the screen. And scan the QR code. There's iPhone and there's Android. Scan it and download Google Translate app. Now, you might prefer a different app. Good, you're ahead of me there. But go ahead, download the app so that you're prepared to be able to have the conversation with someone for whom English is a struggle. There's a mode on Google Translate called conversation, and it means you just hold the phone between you and you speak, and it translates into their language in text, and they speak in their language, and it can translate into English in text. I hope that will just be a resource to prepare you for that conversation you can have over coffee. A tool that will mean that instead of seeing people who are speaking another language and thinking, well, I can't possibly invite them in, hopefully now we've been able to cross that barrier. So let's think. What is the next thing you can do to open up your life? Open up what is yours and say, it belongs to you. My home, my time. What is the next thing you can do to open up space in your life, in your home, in your schedule, and so you can say you belong, your family? But further on in Philippians, there's a surprising reason why radical hospitality is worth it. And it's surprising because it tells us that the big thing about offering radical hospitality is not that it makes a difference. It might do, I hope it does. But that's not why we do it. Radical hospitality is a fragrant offering. If you watch fundraising evenings on TV where the children in need, that kind of thing. Again, if you're not British, perhaps you wouldn't be as familiar with those British things. But there's fundraising programs on TV where you get to watch kind of a variety show, but you text in to give your money. They often want to make sure that you know where your money is going. And that makes sense, right? If you want to give your money away to something, if you want to give to charity, you want to know that it's making a difference. So if you sign up to give money to a charity, you'll often get a newsletter back every 6 months, every month, every however long. And it says, look what we've done with your money. We've opened a new hospital wing. There's these photographs of people with giant scissors. I don't know what they do with the giant scissors the rest of the year around, but they bring them out when they open a hospital wing and cut the ribbon. And they take photos and they want to say, your money made a difference. The way you looked out for the needs of other people made a difference. Hooray for you. You've made a great difference here. Well, Paul has experienced the Philippian hospitality as they've said, you're one of us. We're going to meet your needs. But it's very interesting because Paul doesn't tell them what their money has achieved. He doesn't tell them what the hospitality of Epaphroditus has achieved. In fact, he almost tells them it achieved nothing. So have a look in Philippians chapter 4 now. You might already be there. Flick on to Philippians chapter 4. And verse 17 and 18, Paul is talking about the money that they sent him. And he says, not that I desire your gifts, but what I desire is that more be credited to your account. I have received full payment and have more than enough. I'm amply supplied. Now that I've received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, they are a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. He actually says earlier on in verses 10 to 13 something similar. He says, I got your money, but I don't think I need all of it right now. Which is a little bit of a shame, because they will feel like it just wasn't worth it. But Paul doesn't want them to think that hospitality is because of the difference you make. He says there's two things that is great about their offering. Number one is that it is to their credit, and number two, that it pleases God. So in verse 17 he says, not that I desire your gifts, what I desire is that more be credited to your account. He says, this is good for you that you sent it. It's good for you that you are like this, that you are becoming like this. It's grown you to have looked to the needs of others above yourself. It's been good for you, and the Lord has seen it, and he won't forget it. He says it's like credit. Not like God is looking at the good and the bad that you do. We often stress that that's not Christianity. He's not looking at all the good things and the bad things, and they kind of see if they outweigh, and he's saying this is a good thing. It's not that at all. It's a bit more like when Jesus talks about storing up treasures in heaven instead of treasures on earth. What he means is, it is good for you if you learn to take treasure on earth and let go of it. Take treasure on earth and invest in something far more important, the needs of others. And when you start to let go of treasure on earth and look to the needs of others, you're building up treasure in heaven. And Paul says, I can see that's happening with you. The people showing hospitality, opening up what they have for the sake of others to say, you belong. Paul says that's you letting go of silly earthly treasures. And that is you gaining heavenly treasure. And I want you to take seriously that is good for you. Invest more in that. And he says, secondly, that it's a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. See, we don't make sacrifices anymore. In the Old Testament, they used to sacrifice for sin. So if you do something wrong, there's a sacrifice. Well, we believe Jesus was a sacrifice for sin. But there's another sacrifice in the Old Testament called the fellowship offering. And it's an offering that it's not to make up for bad that you've done. It's just a way of saying, you know what, I love God. I love you, God. And I just want to bring something, bring some food, and I'll give some of it to you, and I'll eat some of it, and it's like I'm eating with God. And so you bring your foods to the altar, and you put half of it on the altar, and you eat some of it, and you think, that's like a meal with God. I get to be enjoying God and in this fellowship with him. Well, Jesus has died for our sin, but there's nothing stopping us from making the fellowship offering, from offering what we have to God to say, but I love doing this with God. I love giving him my stuff. But God today doesn't want that on an altar. He wants you to break your bread and share it not on the altar, but to break your bread and share it with your neighbor. And just like the sacrifice in the Old Testament would go up to God, and he said it was a pleasing aroma, so when you break your bread and share it with your neighbor, God is smelling that as a pleasing aroma, like perfume to him. When you're saying, I love our international church, and I want to give what I have to meet the needs of those people, well, God smells that. He's delighted at that. He's delighted that people are so encouraged by being united with Christ and so conformed by his love that they make costly sacrifices for the sake of radical hospitality. He loves it because it reflects his Son. We're going to have communion shortly, and we'll remember that Jesus showed hospitality, inviting his friends to his table. He invited them round his table, and he broke bread with them, and he shared bread with them. And he said, this isn't just bread I'm sharing everything. I'm not going to hold anything back. My body and blood is for you. We remember Jesus' hospitality, and we can become like him, opening up our table. To remember through communion, we call it communion. Communion means doing it together, having fellowship, communal, a common sharing in the Spirit. We remember through communion to become more like him and open up our tables so that we can share with others. We become Jesus-like when we do it. So we're not focused on the difference it makes. Well done you. Hospitality is really key because it makes such a difference. It's actually that we're saying, we get to reflect back to God what his Son is like towards us. So he said at the beginning, International Sunday means we commit to hospitality. I'd love to have the kind of house that has houseplants in, but I need to be the kind of person who learns how to look after them. And I'd love to have the kind of house at church, which is international, which has people from all races and languages and nations. But I've got to be the kind of person who remembers unity with Christ, who remembers the encouragement in his love, and who's transformed to be like him, to open up my table for others. When we put others first, to meet their needs, to widen our friendship networks, to take people's numbers, we open our homes and our schedules. We want this to be the type of house that reflects the gospel of Jesus. So we learn from that gospel how Jesus treated us, how to be the type of people who put others' needs above our own and commit ourselves to radical hospitality.